Everyone, I'm Neal Bawa, and welcome to this very timely presentation about the impact of the most powerful black swan event in modern history. Not since the World Wars has our country faced such a massive challenge. This presentation is critical knowledge, but it's not Netflix binge watching. I'm not here to scare you, but the fact that you are in this webinar means that you're concerned about the effects of coronavirus on the economy and on your own wealth. You want data and more ideas for, whoops, sorry. Hang on, I lost my audio there for a second. And I believe you want ideas on how you can safeguard your assets. So this webinar is for those of you that can handle the truth, because the truth is not going to be fun. There is a silver lining in there for real estate, but I can tell you up front, it's not huge, it's not immediate, and it's not across the board. So jump off now or steel yourself for the ugly truth. Okay, you still here? All right, good.
I'm still here. I'm with you, Neal.
Awesome. I will start off with a super quick intro about me. I'm a guy who is super relieved that he has no investments in the stock market or in hotels or airlines in particular, because the last week has wiped out between $7 and $9 trillion in wealth in the stock market. I live on the quiet little apartment real estate side of the pond, where the investing is not as sexy or addictive as the stock market or startups. But boy, I am happy today to be the slow and steady turtle, not the speedy rabbit. Our apartment communities are likely to see significant challenges in the coming months, but trust me when I say that our troubles will seem trivial compared to the bloodbath in the equity markets that has just started. Here are some of the apartment and self-storage communities that we have. When I look at this portfolio today, I thank myself for being in an industry where I have the cash flow to cushion the very sharp pain that's about to come. We've been checking our community's cash flow, and many of them can pay a year of mortgage even if their rents fall 50% or more. This gives me a tremendous sense of resolve that when we ignored all those high-flying stock markets that seem to go up 30% a year without any effort, and then instead invested in boring apartments, we did the right thing. We made the right call, and our investors will be able to sleep at night knowing that our tenants still need a roof over their head. Now, before I get to the content, here's the really boring stuff that my lawyer forces on you. This is an educational webinar. It doesn't squeeze out the risk in real estate investing. Our recommendations are not magic. They're personal opinions. Do your own due diligence, and understand that even if you do that, you could still lose money. Bottom line, real estate stocks are at-risk investments. Oh, and feel free to type in your questions. I will take questions at the end if we have time. We will be sending out
the question and answer box, by the way.
In the Q&A box, not in the chat box, in the Q&A box. Right. We'll be sending out a recording of this event back to you tomorrow. Now, this presentation is split into two halves. The first half is about fully understanding this pandemic and its huge healthcare impact and its much huger, higher economic impact. Once we've spent 15 minutes getting dialed in on that foundation, we're going to focus on the impact to jobs, to real estate, which is our biggest section, and to the stock market. And we'll also talk about the impact to daily life in general. So here are some of the items that we include. We're going to talk about, is a full quarantine coming? Is a recession coming? We're also going to ask we're going to show you two different likely scenarios in the road ahead, and we hope that one of those scenarios happens and the other one doesn't. We're going to talk about the impact to real estate, also the impact to hotels and Airbnbs and stocks. And we're going to finish off with a section that is very important for the hundreds of people that are on here that are our investors: asset management. How do we protect the communities and the investors whose money we have managed? The proactive best practices that we've implemented to protect their money. Okay, this is not a presentation about coronavirus itself. My job today is to shine a light on the impact of this deadly pandemic on real estate, on stocks, and on life in general. But how do you do that without looking at the timeline? Things started here on the left on December 31st, and 23 days later, the city of Wuhan was in quarantine, and only 8 days later, the Trump administration restricted travel to China. Now, Feb 13th, in one day, there were 14,000 cases in Hubei province. And then I want you to remember that number. And on that day, the US stock market was close to all-time highs. That's 1 month ago. 1 month ago, seems like an eternity. On Feb 24th, the Trump administration asked for $1 billion in aid. $1 billion. That's a lot of money, right? Well, 24 short days later, they asked for over $1.3 trillion in aid. That's 1,300 billion, and it's not going to be enough. I hope you start seeing the speed at which things change, because unlike any enemy that we've fought in the past, this is an enemy that can attack 173 countries at the same time and force us to rethink our defense every single day. If this was the Avengers movies, this virus is the villain Thanos. And just like the movies, it is kicking our butt. We've never seen anything like it. Not in 2008, not in 2001, not in the oil crisis. Nothing in our history matches the incredible speed with which this enemy moves. Going forward, each day is going to be different. This presentation is going to evolve. It lives at a website we created called coronavirusrealestate.com, and we'll be sending you updates as well. We'll be doing a series of webinars about this because, frankly, our information is becoming outdated each week.
Each hour.
Each hour, yeah. I recently read a very powerful report of conclusions from the UCSF BioHub panels. And you can see pictures of the panel members here. From left to right, we've got Iron Man, Black Widow, Captain Marvel, Hawkeye, and this super geeky looking Bruce Banner. These guys, these are the real Avengers fighting this virus. They shared very key findings with us. You've heard a few of these findings before, so I'll only take 1 minute to go over them. The first finding is scary. They say that containment, stuff like travel restrictions, large gatherings, school shutdowns, anything short of a full-scale Italy-style quarantine with military enforcement is not enough. All it does is it slows the spread to months instead of weeks. Real scary, because what they're saying in a roundabout way is that we're looking at tens of millions of infections, even with this containment strategy that we have going, which leads us right into their key finding two, and to this graph, which I'm sure everyone has seen by now, right? The flattening the curve graph. It is the opinion of this panel that our efforts are now not focused on preventing people from becoming sick. It's focused now on spreading out the infection over a long time, hoping against hope that a drug will be developed early, and hoping that our healthcare system can cope with it in the meantime. Notice, this is just hope. It's not a real strategy. So as soon as you say words like flattening the curve or words like social distancing, immediately dozens of you watching this webinar will start lecturing me about testing or the lack of testing. And that segues me right into their third finding. We're not testing enough. Take a look at the graph. Bahrain and South Korea do 100 times more testing than the US. Testing helps more at the beginning of the crisis than in the middle phase, and we are now in the middle phase. So for us, lockdowns might be more helpful. This slide also points out that in this panel's opinion, we will be mimicking the Italian catastrophe, their words, not mine, in 1 week. Today is the 18th of March. Around the 25th, it's possible that we'll be calling the US the second Italy, with experts screaming for lockdowns. If you think this is an exaggeration, just remember that Italy reported 5,000 infections today, March 18th, and we reported 2,500 infections today. Not that far. A little bit later in this presentation, we're going to provide more data to compare the US and Italy. So here was their fourth key finding. This is not the flu. It came from the same family as the flu, but comparing this thing to the flu is like comparing a flea to an elephant. Its kill rate, for instance, is 10 to 30 times higher than the flu. Secondly, the cost of hospitalization is 100x higher. Why? Because the worst cases need intensive care units and people stay on ventilators for many weeks. If our rate of infection stays over 25% a day for the next 10 days, it's likely to overwhelm our healthcare system in 10 days. But here's the big one. The only country that has proof that this monster can be stopped is China. They shut their economy down to stop it. And the impact of shutting down our economy is at least 1,000x the impact of the flu. So, flea versus elephant. Please don't call it a flu. Key finding 5 was that children and infants don't get this virus. Thank God. If they did, we'd all be much, much worse off. Keep in mind, though, that the cost of keeping 50 million kids out of school in itself is tens of billions of dollars due to the knock-on effects like childcare. Key finding 6, the virus targets those aged over 60. The panel also commented that millennials are the predominant carriers of this disease. They are so far the group that's ignoring social distancing. They have a high infection rate with few symptoms, and they're passing the virus on to other folks, the older folks. And I thought the young and the strong were supposed to protect the elderly. Whatever happened to that concept? Take a look at this video that was released earlier today. Shocking information.
And Dr. Kong, because you're on the front lines, are you seeing lots of young people?
Yes, we have actually seen a lot of young people. I want to echo what has already been said on your show, that while it is true that mortality is associated with more advanced age, that does not preclude younger people having serious disease. So we have seen people with serious disease requiring hospitalization. This is absolutely something that we're seeing.
I'll reiterate once again, of the studies that have been done so far, this is brand new, nearly half the patients who were admitted to the ICU were people younger than 65, which Dr. Gounder, I think, makes these images that we're about to show, put up on the screen here, so confounding and upsetting. It's these pictures of people on spring break in Florida, on these crowded beaches, and then you hear statements like this, and I'll read this out loud. This is from someone from Miami yesterday. If I get corona, I get corona. I'm not going to let it stop me from partying. I think they're blowing it way out of proportion. How dangerous is a statement like that?
Wow. Okay, next up is a short section on the impact that coronavirus will have on your life. We're just going to focus on quarantines. Multifamily University attracts data and analytics-driven investors, so we think that this section will make a lot of sense. And it's quick, just 3 slides. This is a worldwide infection dashboard, which we update each day on coronavirusrealestate.com. As you can see in the first column, you see other countries that have higher infection counts than the US. There's Italy, there's Spain, there's China. So for some reason, a vast majority of Americans think that we are better off than them, or that for some reason the virus is affecting us less, or maybe our doctors are better, or maybe our healthcare system is better, et cetera, et cetera. I've been reading about some of these opinions when I post my videos related to infection count and daily growth average. Let me be blunt. No major country in the world that has a big outbreak is doing as poor of a job as the US. At the current time, our daily growth in infections as a percentage is insanely high. No one else comes close. Here's a graph that shows our infection count. We also track this every day on coronavirusrealestate.com. As you can see, this is a clear exponential curve. The bad news is that the sharpest part of this curve right here has been in the last 3 days, after we implemented social distancing and travel restrictions, closed bars, did more testing. Today isn't even over yet, and we already have a 40+% growth rate from yesterday. Even if magically, starting tomorrow, the rate slows down to 33% a day, we will still have 210,000 infected Americans, not 13,000, 210,000, 11 days from now. 21,000 of those people will require ICU beds. We may not have 21,000 free ICU beds or enough ventilators. Go out 1 month to April 30th, and 170 million Americans are infected. 17 million ICU beds will be needed. But the raw numbers don't matter. What matters is the daily growth rate. Our numbers will still go up, but if our growth rate somehow goes down to a manageable level, we should be okay. Let's take a look at our daily infection growth rate and compare it to worst case scenario, Italy. This in green is our daily growth rate. At 33%, it is the highest daily growth rate in the world. What is shocking is that in the last 3 days, it's higher, 37, 44, 46. Some of that is because we're doing more testing, but a lot of it is because only 8 million of our 322 million Americans are under quarantine. This rate is rising. In blue, you see Italy's daily growth rate, and they were up in the high 20s here, and then they implemented an enforced quarantine, or lockdown as they call it, and you can see that there's a clear declining trend. Here's the data-driven bottom line. We believe that your daily life is about to be disrupted by this virus in a much more massive way. Only 8 million Americans, which is 3% of America, are under a shelter-in-place order. That's the San Francisco Bay Area, us. We expect that in the next week, that number is going to spike, starting with New York and New Jersey, then get rolled out throughout the US. Shelter in place is much stricter than the restrictions that the rest of the US has. Furthermore, we believe that this will not be enough. By April 10th, which is about 20 days from now, we believe that portions of the US will go into something known as lockdown, Italy style, National Guard enforcement. I know that a bunch of you guys are going to slaughter me in the comments right now. Go ahead, fine. This is the way we see it. You're in our webinar after all. We believe that the CDC is doing the same exact math. It's only a matter of time before we enforce draconian measures. Honest answer, true lockdown seems to be the only way to slow this monster down. The rest of this presentation uses this premise. Okay, you still here? Seems like everyone's still here, and
I'm here with you, Neil.
Zoom's been kind to us. At 500, they're supposed to kick people out, but they allowed 522
I know
people
they let
in.
more people in, which is amazing.
I'm sure there's lots of nasty emails in my inbox right now because there were 1,300 of you that were registered. So our next section, it talks about the possibility of a U.S. recession because of the coronavirus. Once again, the speed at which this enemy works means that even as this presentation was being built over the last 5 days, the predictions kept changing and getting harsher every single day. The folks at Green Street Advisors, for instance, they were the first to warn that the economic impact will be massive. They also pointed out this black swan event reduces the chances that Trump will get reelected. Interesting, Jan Hatzius, the chief economist at Goldman Sachs, warned about a very sharp reduction in economic activity in March and in April. Joel Prakken, the chief economist at IHS Markit, warned that the US economy is likely to shrink by 8% in the second quarter. That's on par with the 2008 financial crisis. Another bank, Deutsche Bank, has a more aggressive projection. They're projecting a 13% reduction to GDP in the US in Q2, which is much greater than what we have ever seen in history. Now contrast that 8% reduction with Goldman Sachs, who talked about a 5% shrinkage in America's economy. Now on the good side, Goldman is very bullish on a big bounce back in GDP in Q3 and Q4. Personally, I think that they're being too bullish because they believe that the impact of coronavirus will be minimized by end of June. I'm not so sure about that, but hey, what do I know? Here's Kevin Hassett. He's been a top economist in the Trump administration. He sees the odds of a global recession at close to, and I mean global, not just US, a global recession at close to 100% right now. Let's listen to this quick video.
Worked in the Trump White House. You were his lead economist. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin is downplaying the risk of a recession. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers says 85 to 90% chance there is a recession and it won't be mild. And Gary Cohn, who worked with you at the White House, says we're already in a recession. Are we in or heading to a recession?
Right. I think that the odds of a global recession are close to 100% right now. I think in the U.S., we're going to have a very terrible second quarter. We just, at the Lindsay Group, we just ran the numbers carefully over the weekend, and we think second quarter is going to be about -5%. And we think the jobs number in early April might be, as much as -1 million or so, because there are going to be a lot of people. Nobody's going to get hired next week in the survey week. And so the point is just that you're going to have one really bad quarter. If you're going to have a recession, then you're going to have two bad quarters. And I think that's going to depend on, whether we get ahead of the curve on the coronavirus. And that's a big unknown right now.
Okay, Kevin, a lot of news there. Not only did you say close to 100% chance we have a global recession, but you think we will lose 1 million jobs in April?
It's a very, very hard thing to figure. But basically what happens in the job market is that the gross flows in and out of work are much bigger than the net. And so that there are millions and millions of people who are hired and fired every month. And then that 200,000 number you see is the net. If it's positive, then that means there are more hires than fires. And the issue is just that we think that next week of the survey week, there are going to be basically no hires, but there'll probably be a normal amount of
Never
hires.
in our history have we had a month where there were no hires. We've never even come close. So these layoffs, they're going to have a domino effect. All those airports and restaurants and bars and gyms closing means that there's a very large slew of layoffs coming across the US. It's estimated that 18% of all households in the US will be impacted by layoffs or reduced hours. Over 7 million jobs will be impacted, and that's just the restaurant and bar industry. This is happening super duper quickly. For example, a 24-year-old named Angela Gervasi was enjoying a day off last Thursday. She got a text from a coworker. PJ Clark's, the Philly restaurant that she worked at, was letting her and others go. By Monday, the place had shut down. Angela barely had 2 hours to process the bad news before she got more. The Florida radio station that she'd been applying for a job told her that the hiring process is delayed because the station shifted to a work-from-home setup. And then this Monday, she learned that another local restaurant where she was also training as a cook was closing. 3 in 3 days. Normally, Angela and other workers like her would take on freelance work to support themselves, but freelance work like babysitting or Uber driving is also not an option. So these are some of the industries that are going to be impacted. So all in all, we expect to see 3 million jobs lost by the summertime. And we're now seeing reports that this number may actually be too low. Now, government stimulus will help a great deal. So it's great to see Congress and White House working together. For the moment, at least, their partisanship has fallen by the wayside. Okay, so that's a lot of data, right? But what does that data really lead to? Well, we see 2 paths, 2 scenarios. And understanding these scenarios is critical to understanding the impact on real estate and the impact on stocks. Neither scenario is good, but I can assure you that one is vastly better than the other. Scenario 1 is that we will try the containment and care method. This is what we're currently trying. 97% of the US is doing this as of March 18th today. In this scenario, there's no nationwide quarantine a la Italy or Spain. There's no lockdown. People still travel. They still go to beaches. They still go to work if they need to. According to that UCSF Avengers team, in this scenario, 40 to 70% of the people in the US become infected over the next 12 to 18 months. On the low end, this means 2.4 million Americans die before we build up herd immunity. On the high end, the death rate would be 3 times that before our healthcare system becomes overwhelmed. If, for example, 7 to 8% of those that become infected in Italy die because their healthcare system is completely overwhelmed. Now there's scenario 2, which assumes that by March 25th or before, that's a week from today, the US starts doing what Spain and Italy are doing and the San Francisco Bay Area is doing. In this scenario, 10 to 20 days after we start lockdowns, we should start seeing a drop in the infection rate. And hopefully that drop will be like China's, not like Italy's. Italy's results are better than ours, but they go up and down, where China's results are very, very consistent. So in this scenario, the US ends up with 200,000 infections and 3,000 to 4,000 deaths. Our healthcare system is still going to get overwhelmed with 200,000 infections, but for a much shorter amount of time. So as you can tell, we're rooting for scenario 2 to happen. If one happens, then all those preppers that are putting away guns and bullets and gold will turn out to be right. And that would really piss me off. So what are the impacts on real estate and stocks? Well, scenario 1 leads to the deepest depression in US history, likely to be deeper than 1929. In this scenario, all real estate is likely to become illiquid for a number of years. The Dow Jones is likely to drop below 10,000 points and stay there for a long time. To be honest, we don't know of any techniques that we can use to manage our real estate in this scenario. The second scenario, we go into lockdown for 4 to 8 weeks. That puts the US into an ultra sharp recession in Q2 with the potential for a bounce back. Some people think Q3, some people think Q4 for a bounce back. In this scenario, we do see a drop in real estate prices across the board. Single family and apartments will both see drops because of fear, lack of liquidity, lack of equity, and both represent good buys in our opinion. the hotel industry and the retail industry will see very large, outsized drops and also large-scale defaults. That's because the damage to them has been much more immediate versus multifamily or single family. Hotels are unquestionably the worst hit, and so smart investors are about to see some stunning bargains, not just in Q3, but in this quarter. We are already seeing calls to brokers about defaults in the hotel sector already. Strip malls are the next sector in real estate that will be hard hit because the tenants are small companies who will stop paying rent immediately. So ton of bargains there. Now, in another section of this presentation, we will discuss all of the other storage sectors, senior housing, student housing, public storage. We'll go into depth in all of those. So let's go a little bit deeper into real estate, right? It's been so hard to get solid opinions from people, but here we go. First, let's get something important out of the way. There's a whole bunch of you typing in the chat, oh, what about the low interest rates? Look, we know that ultra low interest rates that are what we're seeing should be giving real estate a boost. As you can see from this graph, as rates go down from left to right, oh, actually right to left, people can afford a lot more home for their down payments. The problem is that rates went down to crazy low levels in 2008 as well. I mean, it helped, but it took a significant amount of time. And during that time, it was still a bloodbath. And so we see low rates helping the housing market in Q3 or Q4, putting a floor under home prices. But over the next 3.5 months, we don't see them making an impact. None. And by the way, our thinking on this was echoed by Scott Bowling at PricewaterhouseCoopers. He says that low rates and tight housing inventory will not be enough to shelter the housing industry from what are likely material, but still highly uncertain impacts from the coronavirus pandemic. You know, I love it that these Wall Street types hedge their bets 6 different ways in every single sentence. So we've been reading reports, lots of reports. CBRE is the big dog in commercial brokerage markets, and they're fairly bullish. They do see property values and sales volume taking a short-term hit right here. We agree. They see hotels expecting a 20% drop in revenue. They're wrong. Most hotels in the US have now reported a 60 to 80% drop in revenue. For multifamily, they're bullish. We agree, but we want to point out that in the short term, there will be an all ships dropping effect. And multifamily is no exception, CBRE. So we looked at their main competitor, Marcus & Millichap, and we found their report to be so outrageously bullish, it looks like a sales manager wrote it. This kind of outrageous head in the sand attitude is what got us in trouble last time. And we must point out that it's their opinion, and we've generally found M&M to be quite fair and balanced, but we really think they missed the boat this time. Or maybe they know something we don't. I don't know. So to break the tie between CBRE and Marcus & Millichap, we looked at Yardi Matrix, our favorite reporting vendor. Well, they started with recession, so that definitely gives them credibility. They expect the impact to last 3 to 6 months, so they're hedging their bets a little bit. They point out that multifamily is well capitalized and should weather a slowdown, so we agree there. And they also point out that there'll be short-term rent collection issues, and we strongly agree with that. At the end, they advise keeping some of the powder dry because market shocks could result in opportunities. You know, so they're absolutely 100% right on that, Yardi, 100% right. As an investor, you have to remember that you've already kicked yourself a dozen times for not buying more real estate in 2009. So keep some powder dry because your opportunity is coming. Now, let's move over to single family. I live in California, and the California Association of Realtors just put out a report. Again, we find the report very bullish, though they did point out that the recovery will take longer. They also mentioned that new home construction will slow further, which we agree with. Now, that's a double-edged sword. As new home construction slows, the construction industry could take a big hit. That hurts the economy. On the other hand, less new homes means supply goes down, demand goes up, and demand going up is good news for those of you with the courage and the dry powder to buy in this upcoming dip. The realtors, we looked at them. They are just in denial. 78% of realtors in a recent survey, and this is California, said that coronavirus had no impact on home buyers. 77% said they saw no changes in listings. I don't believe it. I do believe this bullet right here, that roof stock traffic went up 5x from panicked Asian investors that are looking to buy US real estate. That does make sense, and I don't know how much that's going to help, but I don't think it's going to help enough. Oops, messed up animations. So here's what we see is going to happen. We see that there's going to be a very significant decline in listings. Sellers will not list homes because they don't want strangers in their homes. They're going to be fearful of falling prices. Buyers will postpone decisions because of fear, plus because they're worried about their jobs. They're also going to adopt this wait and watch attitude. So expect both prices and sales volume for single family to be hit pretty much immediately within the next few weeks. Okay, this is my favorite slide, and it'll answer so many of the questions that you guys have been typing in. So the question that keeps getting thrown at me over and over and over again is, Neal, which sectors of the real estate market will get hurt the most, and which are likely to be the most resilient? So it took our team hours and hours of searching, but we actually found the data for you. The awesome folks over at Green Street Advisors looked at the stock market, and they looked at the real estate investment trust, the REITs, for the different real estate sectors, and they analyzed all of them. And the results had some small surprises, but they mostly make sense. Let's dive deep into this. So first, it makes perfect sense that senior housing and skilled nursing would be hit super hard. That public relations disaster from that nursing home in Washington that had over 100 cases means that people are afraid to put their parents into a senior home. Also, it's likely that this sector will face brand new mandates from healthcare authorities about cleanliness and infection control. That's going to drive up their expenses at exactly the wrong time. So I do expect senior housing to have a tough time for a year or more. Next, the lodging or hotel industry is likely to be hit harder in the coming weeks. So I expect that this 36% negative number is going to keep going up. Ditto for the gaming sector, right, which mostly includes hotels, but in gambling cities like Las Vegas and Reno. They're going to be hit very hard if the lockdowns last more than 4 to 6 weeks because they have really huge expenses. No surprise that student housing rounds out the top 5 sectors that took a hit. With students being sent home, that sector has some unique challenges to deal with in the next 6 months. However, this is a strong sector, so I expect it to bounce back by next year. In the short term, though, this sector may have lots of buying opportunities for those of you who remember the great Warren Buffett line. Remember that? Be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful. Others are fearful right now. Now, let's move down the list. Malls are in trouble. So let's look at malls. They were already in trouble before coronavirus, by the way. Oops. I want to show you the third portion. So because of the Amazon effect, remember, they're not well capitalized. There's a ton of debt. And now they have non-paying tenants in their malls. Bottom line, we're going to see slaughter in this sector. So we see it getting worse. We expect some loan defaults, expect some requests for bailouts, and lots of opportunity in shorting corporate debt that is tied to this sector. There's even more opportunity in strip malls because they're often owned by mom and pop operators, and they don't have the cash or the liquidity to get this through this crisis. Multifamily operators tend to have higher liquidity. So if this lasts longer than a month, you're going to start seeing strip malls in the market. Now, I'm not fond of strip mall ownership, but if the price drops by 50%, I'm setting up a fund to buy cheap assets that I can flip in a year. Our first surprise in this list is manufactured homes or mobile home parks. This is a sector that is typically very recession resilient. So surprised to see such a sharp decline. Now, it makes sense if you think about it. Mobile home parks are one level below Class C apartments. So they're typical tenant only has a few $100s in the bank. So maybe the market's thinking they might face a lot of evictions. Sure. But if their stock keeps going down like this, I'm going to jump in and start buying shares of these mobile home REITs. The sector did quite well in 2008 and might do even better this time. Rounding out the hard hit group is the office sector. Many of you are going to be surprised to see just a 23% hit. It doesn't make sense, right? You're thinking this should hurt more. I get it, but I think that this is fairly priced. Keep in mind that the office sector has a lot of small companies that may not pay their mortgage next month, but a huge amount of office space is leased out to larger companies who are not going to default on rent easily or stop paying in a month or two. So this is another sector that might see a ton of defaults on the smaller offices. So on the smaller offices, you might see defaults. I'm keeping my eye on it, and I'm not going to hesitate to jump in if I see big discounts, especially because in 2 minutes, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with these offices that I'm going to buy. All right, the group at the bottom, the least affected group. Not surprised to see apartments in the list, though I think they don't deserve to be driven down as much as 23%. I expected them to be next to self-storage at the bottom there. So I can speculate here, and I'm sure this is going to come up in the question. So here's a question for the audience. Why do you guys think that apartments are down this much? I've got my answers. I want to see yours. Now, below the apartments are life science. To be honest, we don't understand the difference between this life science category and this medical office category. So we're going to club them together. We think, whoops, sorry. There we go. We think that, hang on. I lost my place. Give me a second. So bottom line, we think that the biggest winner from this worldwide pandemic, the biggest winner in real estate are medical offices. You remember after 9/11, security companies saw insane growth? Well, this time after the world recovers from this black swan, we're going to see more healthcare facilities, more medical offices. A larger portion of our GDP is going to be allocated to healthcare for decades to come. And I'm looking to buy offices, like general offices, and turn them into medical offices if I can. Immunology, infection control, medical equipment, they're all going to see huge gains as soon as Q3. And we as investors really need to jump on it. So there's two more categories to discuss in the list. One is single family rentals. The other one is self-storage. Both of those are likely to do well. And I think that the stock market is pricing these fairly. So yes, we will see defaults in the single family market because a lot of smaller landlords cannot take the hit on not getting rent for 3 or 4 months. You and I and other smart investors will scoop up these properties. But hear this, this is not 2008. There is no glut of single family rentals in the market. So if you see bargains in Q3, act on it. I'm going to finish off with self-storage. As many of you know, I've been harping on self-storage as possibly the best sector in real estate, and coronavirus amplifies that. Self-storage, many benefits. Eviction is cheap, very simple. Because most tenants pay by auto pay, it takes them months to even think about moving out of their self-storage unit. With all that is going on, your self-storage unit is going to be the last thing that your average tenant is going to think about. So I think that this sector will continue to do well, and it deserves its least affected ranking in this commercial real estate list. Let's finish off the real estate impact with a comment about hotels. As you can see, my graphics designer, she got carried away a bit, but she was trying to make a point. The hotel industry is decimated, just decimated. For instance, Marriott is the largest hotel chain in the world. They are laying off tens of thousands of workers this week, and they're warning that it will become hundreds of thousands of workers in a few weeks. The travel industry, which includes the airlines, by the way, projected a 75% loss in revenue, $355 billion in total losses, 4.6 million jobs lost in 2020. Deep impact, indeed. Still, Marriott might be better off than Airbnb hosts. In a stunning surprise move, Airbnb changed its policy this week and refunded all guests, costing Airbnb hosts billions of dollars with no advance notice. As you can see on the bottom left, a large class action lawsuit is on its way. Note that they did this worldwide. My family and I had paid $2,000 for 6 nights of an Airbnb apartment in Dubai starting March 28. We received all of our money back. Lots of these Airbnb units have very fat mortgages, and the traffic does not come back for a few months. It might be longer because people are worried about infection. So expect lots of bargains, really good bargains. Dry powder, anyone? Okay, time for the stock market. So we're real estate people, so we kept this section really, really short. 2 slides, right? But we think that there's some bargain buys in here, plus some stocks that you should consider dumping. And yes, you will get this deck, so you don't need to write this down. So here's our list of companies that you might want to short or sell. Remember, we're not stock market advisors, so use this list with caution. We think that the fast food chains will bounce back the fastest. ESPN, Starbucks, Lyft, Uber could recover fairly quickly, so might be bargains now. Airlines and cruise ships and hotels and casinos will take the longest to recover, so consider shorting them. We also think that Airbnb could be hit for a while, given the change in attitudes about infection. And here's a list of companies that we think will benefit. Consult your stock advisor before buying. So a lot of these stocks are good short-term buys. Kellogg's, Kimberly-Clark, Johnson & Johnson, Campbell Soup, Clorox, all have short-term benefits from coronavirus. So do grocery stores such as Trader Joe's, Walgreens, CVS, Costco, Albertsons. Gaming companies like Electronic Arts, Activision, and Zynga are likely to see huge revenue increases, so they definitely look underpriced. And then tech providers like Zoom and RingCentral and Cisco WebEx are good buys because we could see lockdowns in different parts of the world for more than a year. But the big winners in this list might be Akamai, which powers the back end of the internet, and Gilead, which is developing vaccines. DoorDash and Grubhub, those are food delivery services, they could also see long-term benefits, so check those out as well. All right. We know hundreds of you are investing with us and you're worried about what we are doing with our communities. So we're finishing this off by offering the best practices that we are using. If you've got an apartment rental, you should be writing these down. We could teach a 4-hour class on all the strategies that we're using, but let's try to cram it in 5 minutes or less. So we're doing offensive strategies and defensive strategies. Both are important, both are critical, and both need to be implemented very quickly. Again, this is a small portion of what we're doing, but our investors in the call are immediately going to recognize the hard work. So keep in mind that our communities are well stocked with money and can go the better part of the year, even if we lose half of our rents. And that is the power of cash flowing assets like multifamily and public storage. Our very first offensive strategy is health assessment. Our team is carefully monitoring cases on all of our properties. We don't have any so far, but we know that it's going to happen. So we've already started researching the right healthcare measures to take in case a resident contracts the coronavirus. Oops. We're also assessing whether certain buildings are more at risk and weighing moving tenants to other buildings. For each community, we're providing our tenants with a very comprehensive list of services, grants, loans, local, federal, state assistance, and we're reaching out to tenants to inform them of these services. Oops. And we're also evaluating at-risk tenants. We're conducting surveys to see if our communities have a high level of exposure to the airline, hotel, travel, or entertainment industries, so we can be proactive about remediation. Leasing is super important today. We are boosting online advertising, providing payment options, renting units through video tours that are posted to Facebook and YouTube and websites. Applications are also being moved online for each of our projects. We're offering concessions. We're going back to notice to vacate tenants to see if they now wish to stay put. We're working on providing care packages to board tenants like deck of cards, coloring books for kids, etc. Plus, we're offering a lease modification program. So you don't want to pay this month? Fine. Your rent's $1,000. Well, what we're going to do is you have 5 months of your lease left. We're going to change your lease so that from now onwards, your rent is $1,200 and you can have a month free. We're also going to do 2 chunk installment payments instead of 1. Those are restricted for tenants that have previously paid us on time. All of these offensive strategies are now in action. Plus, we have defensive strategies. We've canceled all resident events, closed all amenities. Coffees and cookies are gone from the leasing office. Fitness centers are closed. Playgrounds are closed. Quarterly inspections are canceled. The office is closed with communication only through phones. If you haven't done these at your properties, what are you waiting for? So we're evaluating work orders for urgency. Only urgent orders are being processed today. Very urgent orders only. And then, DIY items like smoke alarms and batteries and furnace filters, we're just leaving them at the door. And we're also doing a lot to make sure that our maintenance techs do not get sick. We're making property by property decisions on unit turns. Do we keep rehabbing or do we stop? Does it make sense to rehab less? Does it make sense to rehab more if we can't lease up a property? If a property has no demand and units are not going to lease up, we'll probably keep rehabbing. If On the other hand, if we can lease up a unit right now, we don't want to spend $1 on rehabs. Everything changes when you're in defensive mode. So the last part of this slide is an important one, because this is a direct message to all of you that are on this particular webinar. Our job has just changed.
Yep.
Our job before was to make you money, to make you distributions. Today, our job is to protect your capital. We're going to withdraw, or withhold, I should say, all distributions to investors. We don't need the money. We're well capitalized. But our goal at this point is to create a war chest if this thing gets really, really nasty. In a quarter, if things are good, we will send that money over to you. So you'll end up with 2 quarters worth of distributions. We're also stopping paying ourselves asset management fees, and any non-essential expenses are being cut. Our goal is to preserve your capital. We know that we are one of the strongest verticals out there. We know that multifamily is going to come out very, very strong at the other end of this, because some of these other sectors are getting slaughtered. People still need a place to live. And we believe that this recession will be fairly short, and we'll see lower cap rates, which means higher prices at the end of it, because interest rates, once cut, cannot be raised effectively for a year, year and a half. So we feel that we're in a terrific, terrific position. And for those of you that are interested, we have projects open, we have value add projects, we have new construction projects, and we're happy to answer all of your questions regarding those. We've already been messaging our investors about their specific property, and we will continue to do so every week. Finally, we're also monitoring delinquency and financial monitoring. If delinquencies reach higher amounts, we are open to all sorts of creative solutions, including stopping paying our mortgage or getting a forbearance. If tenants cannot be evicted, I'm sure that we can also get a forbearance on our mortgages. So as we start looking at this, we have lots and lots and lots of options. We have a full deck of cards that we can play for the next year, year and a half. And it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense that investors look at this as a defensive option today. Because do you think this stock market is a good option for you? And that is our presentation today. We took a few extra minutes than what we wanted to. We will keep doing webinars on this. This thing is so big that we're not doing a webinar. We're doing a series of webinars. So you will see them all on Multifamily U. If you want information on coronavirus, especially you want daily counts, please go to coronavirusrealestate.com, coronavirusrealestate.com. And now we will take your questions.
All right, Neal, there are a lot of questions. So I'm only taking questions from the Q&A box, people. So if there's a moratorium on Fannie and Freddie mortgage payments, do you have any indication if commercial mortgages will follow suit?
I believe so. So at this point, if tenants stop paying, or significant portions of tenants stop paying, it's very likely to happen, because Fannie and Freddie will get forced into it. So in 2008, similar measures were taken. Keep in mind, even 10-year loans were refinanced in 2008. So we've got options. Every option that we have, we're going to use it regardless of whether we actually need it or not.
That's right. And this is a common question we've seen phrased in several ways. Should we do a deal that we have in our backlog or drop out? Should we even look at any deals in the next 90 days?
My opinion, don't do any deals right now. We are at the event horizon of a black hole. The next 6 or 8 weeks, you need to watch. Don't do any deals.
Let's see. Impact on the Houston real estate. Energy companies are losing 50% of their value.
That's short term. I don't think oil's going away. There's no long-term impact to the oil industry. The oil industry always bounces back. They're going to have a bloodbath. A bunch of people, a bunch of companies will buy a bunch of other companies. I don't think oil goes away. I think Houston has a bloodbath for 3 months, but then most other places will have a bloodbath for 3 months. I honestly do not believe that you will see weakness in the Houston economy a year from now.
Have you seen any supply chain disruptions or employment personnel shortages impact construction projects yet?
We haven't seen any supply chain issues on the new construction projects that we have. We do expect some. I think that it's likely to happen at some point in time. But actually, the new construction side, we see more benefit than downside. Number one, on projects where we haven't tied up our loan yet, our loans are millions of dollars cheaper. Number two, we now have more bargaining power because I think that a lot of real estate people are going to lose their jobs as well. And also there's a lot of people that are in these retail and other industries that used to be people that were in the real estate industry. So I think our ability to bargain has actually improved. I do expect to see some supply chain issues, but it looks like China's bouncing back. So it looks like the supply chain issues may be short. At this point, the Chinese economy is open. Even Apple stores have reopened in China.
Okay, so if we see a great deal in the San Francisco market, so California market, which you know, Neal, and you and I don't normally look at those deals, but for people that, what would you do if you started seeing great deals in California?
I would buy them if they're great deals. The question is, are they really great deals? A lot of Californians tend to delude themselves into thinking that whatever deal they're looking at is a great deal. But you're the expert on California. We are not. But I would buy a great deal in California, yes.
How do you think this thing will impact new construction projects like Falls at Crisman Commons?
So it's too soon to answer that question. What we are finding is, as we said, I mean, we are well capitalized. We've got money in the bank. So we might wait for 3 to 6 months. If something bad happens, we might see a month or 2 months of delay for the city to approve our stuff because, you know, the city is shut down at this point in time, or will be shut down soon. So I do expect to see a 1 to 2 month delay. But to be honest, that's nothing compared to having a $2 million saving on interest. So,
right, and I mean, during that time, we don't have a construction loan, so we don't have a holding cost issue.
Exactly. So
and I also want to point out
$0 holding cost.
I also want you to maybe talk to a little bit, Neal, the differences between markets. So when we're looking at Phoenix and Raleigh-Durham compared to some of the other markets where we have new construction in both of the Raleigh-Durham and the Phoenix Mesa markets, compared to some of the other markets out there, what do you think?
I think that in the short term, every market in the U.S. will suffer because of the shutdown. But once the shutdown finishes, the markets that are strongest will bounce back the quickest because all of their employees will get rehired. So if we don't get into that gloom doom scenario 1 that I showed you, and hopefully we don't, we get to scenario 2, then in that case, the markets that are stronger will bounce back the quickest. So I'm not worried about new construction projects yet. There may be other things coming, like we may have issues getting loans. But that certainly hasn't been seen yet. One thing I must say is I have to compliment the Federal Reserve. This crisis is just beginning. They've cut rates twice already, huge rate cuts. They've flooded the market with $700 billion of liquidity. They're providing interbank loans. Their entire playbook, which they perfected over a year in 2008, they've executed in the first 2 weeks of this crisis. So kudos to them.
Here's a good one. Speaking of loans, I'm going to bring up the B word. Are there any risks to value add properties using bridge loans in this time?
I think bridge loans are your best bet at this point in time. What are the chances of interest rates going up? I mean, the world is slowing. The chances of a world recession are pretty much 100%. We worry about bridge loans when we believe interest rates are going to go up. We don't worry about bridge loans when interest rates are low and the world economy is weak.
Yeah. So what do you recommend to do with the 401k? I've got somebody here who's lost $40,000 within the past week.
I have no good news for you, but I have bad news. You're about to lose more. I don't believe that this is the bottom of the stock market. There's no magic to the stock market. If you know, what I would say is you want to keep it in the stock market at this point, you should consider looking at some of those companies that we showed that we think are going to go up. Look at those. Hopefully you can make some of it up.
Okay, on another tact, would you recommend to cash out, refinance, and pull out as much cash as possible given these new lower rates?
Yeah, if your property supports it, now may be a good time.
Do you expect to see a V-shaped rebounds for the economy, or are you thinking it's more of a U? And if it's a U, is it a shallow U or a deep U?
So we believe that it is a V shape, but the V is a very deep V. Because of the nature of this virus, the damage that it's causing to the world economy is substantially more than 2008. So think of a V shape, but imagine a V that goes down very far and then very quickly bounces back up, but still huge amounts of damage.
Do you think rates will go negative?
Yes.
Wow. Can't banks say no to refinancing even if the Fed rate is low?
Yes, they can. If they think that you're not liquid enough, they can also say no if they don't like your area. But so far, we have not seen a liquidity crunch. It's early in this place, and obviously that's one of the things that we worry about on the multifamily side if you have a liquidity crunch. But when you got a bridge loan, did you not get extensions? We bought multi-year extensions on our loans. We can sit here and extend our loans for all the way to 2024.
At
if you
rates
didn't
that are
buy extensions,
predetermined. Yes.
Exactly, based on predetermined rates. If you didn't get extensions, why didn't you get extensions? Getting
As
bridge
well as a
loans
cap
without
rate
extensions.
lock.
Yep, or correct, that's right. Well, we've got a cap rate lock if rates go up, but we've got the ability to extend our rates. So we're not worried about rates going up at this point, but we hedged ourselves both ways, and you should have done that too.
So let's see. So what about thoughts on borrowing from a HELOC to invest in upcoming opportunities? I mean, there's going to be potentially a lot of opportunities. Is it too risky to borrow on your HELOC to do that?
Yes. This is an event that threatens the world economy and the world order. Don't borrow from your HELOC when there is such a high level of risk. If the economy is recovering nicely in Q3 and Q4 and the virus doesn't come back, or we develop a vaccine early, maybe then you should look at it. Don't do it until then.
So there's a few questions out here, very common questions, especially at this time. What are your thoughts in terms of buying, and when it's time to buy, what are your thoughts about A, B, or C?
Because of the nature of this virus and the damage that it does, it affects the retail business the most. So I would say that Bs are much safer than Cs. And if you can get As at a good deal, which you might see in certain markets, I would go there.
So what is a strategy you would recommend for passive investors? Would you recommend that they hold off for more time?
I don't know. I think the bottom line is operators like us are going to find a way to make money. So the key is, if you're truly a passive investor and you type the question as a passive investor, then you should be working with professionals. If you're seeing the work that we are putting in and the way that we're hedging our bets, consider giving us money. Because to be honest, today we need your money much more than we did last year. Last year we were flush with money. We had too much money. We had investors were being turned away. But today we're going to have a lot more opportunity. We're going to have way more opportunity, higher quality opportunities. Buyers now have leverage compared to what we did 4 months ago. It makes all the sense in the world not to be afraid today, because others are afraid.
In the last multifamily project you purchased, what is the max economic vacancy you could handle for a minimum of 1 quarter? And at what level would you walk away and hand over the keys to the lender? I can answer that one.
Sure.
We could handle 0% occupancy for an entire year because of the way we're leveraged on the last multifamily project we purchased.
That's right.
Because
0% for an entire year.
Because we build in lots of leverage and lots of capital to our deals. We pre-prepare for situations like this. So I've been on asset management calls all day. It's Thursday. That's my life on Thursdays as well as Tuesdays. And I can tell you for a fact, 100% vacancy for an entire year. We could board the place up and still pay our mortgage for a year. So that's the answer to that one. Let's see. How will the availability of 1031 DST syndications be affected in the coming months? Will sponsors be expecting higher fees than usual or offer lower yields as a result of upcoming market changes?
I don't know, but I think they should offer lower yields and they should charge higher fees. Their life has become much harder all of a sudden, but I don't know if either of those two things will happen.
It's very interesting. So across the syndication space, a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, we were all talking about how difficult it was to find deals, and yields are going down. So pref should be coming down as well. Instead of 8 pref, we're looking at 7 pref and trying to move even to 6 prefs with our investors. What do you think the pref should be going forward, Neal, in the next few months? Do you think we're still at a 6 pref or 7 pref, or are we back up to an 8 pref?
I think that we'll be able to pay higher pref rates because I think we're about to get bargains. The key is we've got analytical investors who understand that they missed out on 2009 because of fear. And I know that these investors will come with us. If we've got more room in the deal, which I think we will, why wouldn't we offer higher prefs?
So we've got somebody that's about to close on a C+ class investment property. Should they hold off hoping for the price to drop, although it's still a good deal?
Yes. If I was you, I'd threaten to pull out and renegotiate.
Oh, there you go. Given that the USA is barely doing any testing, we don't know how many people truly have COVID. How large do you think that the real infection numbers are?
It doesn't really matter because no one is doing, with the exception of South Korea and Bahrain, no one is doing massive amounts of testing. So everyone's got this, number and then a bigger number. What we find is we're using coronavirusrealestate.com to look at daily numbers for 8 different countries. So regardless of how many people we have that are infected but are not being counted, the trends are very visible. The US is doing the worst job.
Let's switch to student housing. How is the grid in Buffalo doing? Is that a good market? And let's talk a little bit about Class A student housing.
So obviously the grid at this point is not affected at all because it's in construction. We're delighted with the construction at this point. We're 3 or 4 months ahead. It could get affected and significantly affected if the students do not come back at the end of August. But to me, the end of August is 1,000,000 miles away and 1,000,000 light years away. It's a very well capitalized project. So we've got options in case we don't get a lot of students. It was also built as a project that has micro units. So we would simply pivot it to offer it to multifamily residents. It's in a great location. So there's a lot of people that we can rent it to.
A great location that's one stop up from the Buffalo Medical Center, as well as the campus there. So there are a lot of medical professionals, which, hey, don't we need medical professionals in our lives these days, that would also be potential tenants for that space.
Yes, but let me be honest, I do worry about it, that this thing could drag on for so long that our number of students at the grid could be affected. But keep in mind, we don't see any impact to the construction because the grid is ending construction well ahead of schedule.
Over 50%.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the financial outlook for the industrial asset class?
I think it's very muddy. I think demand in the short term is going to go down. That asset class has been very bubbly, and people have been paying up a huge amount of money for basically 4 walls. That's what industrial is. It's 4 walls and a roll-up door. And I think that people have been paying a lot for it. And I think the sector is going to be in for some pain. The only part of that sector that I see really doing well is the logistics part of the sector, because as you've already heard, Amazon is hiring 200,000 people. They need more of the logistics warehouses.
How long should people wait to invest in the Texas market?
I don't know the answer to that.
So what about handling heavy construction and entitlement projects as the finished productive asset valuation and cap rates have changed? So things have changed, right?
Yeah, you have to evaluate whether your cap rates are going to be different 2 or 3 years from now. So my feedback is, if you haven't taken on the project, maybe wait for 6 to 8 weeks. So by that time, there will be more clarity. By that time, either we will be recovering or we'll be in Armageddon mode. If we're in Armageddon mode, then you probably don't want to do that project anyway. If we are recovering, then you know that cap rates 2 or 3 years down the line when you finish doing your construction are not going to matter. In general, I must say that entitlement and zoning is now much more risky than it was 3 months ago.
Do you foresee any long-term effects to our economy, jobs market? So will jobs that are forced to work from home stay that way as we begin to recover?
I don't see them staying that way. But the first part of your question, do I see a long-term impact to jobs? Yes. The prediction for hotels show that even 8, 9 months from now, they will not have recovered 10 to 15% of their jobs. We cannot make the assumption that this will simply all go away after 8 weeks or 10 weeks of pain. No, it has damaged the world economy in a tremendous fashion. So I do expect that growth will be stunted even after recovery.
So that kind of leads into this question. Can you talk about the real estate investment world today versus the financial crisis and the real estate depression of 2008?
Well, so the real estate market today is better capitalized. We've got much more liquidity. The Fed's very friendly. We've cut interest rates very early in the crisis. So in many ways, we're better off. The challenge, of course, is that this is a very unique kind of crisis. How do you compare this to 2008 or 2001 or the oil crisis? How do you compare it to anything? If people don't have jobs and they can't go out to work for more than 8 weeks, then all bets are off the table. And I don't think real estate is safer than any other place. I don't think apartment real estate is safe. I don't think self-storage is safe. There will be no safe asset class in the world if we cannot figure out a way to get the number of infections down to the point where we can have a semblance of an economy. You look at China, people are still wearing masks. You look at China, people are still practicing social distancing, but they're back at work. The Chinese economy is open. We have to figure out how they did it.
So what about other projects that are in the construction beginning stage, like Coyote Creek? Is this liquidity crisis going to change the outlook of the project?
No, because the project is fully funded and the loan is already allocated. So the only thing that I can imagine is that they might come and ask us, the sponsors, to maintain a higher level of liquidity. I have taken the necessary steps to become much more liquid, and the Coyote Creek project will benefit from it.
Yeah, it's moving along quite well, actually. Would you liquidate Amazon shares right now in order to have the liquidity for real estate deals?
No.
What would happen to the current economical situation if a miracle cure is found in the next few months?
I
think that's the V, right? That's the
the V. That's definitely a V. The V will get less sharp. I mean, less down, less up. So it's now a shallower V. Just so you know, I don't believe in miracles, and I especially don't believe in miracle cures for vaccines. They're extraordinarily difficult to do. Anyone thinking that a cure is 3 months away, you're not really an investor, you're a speculator anyway.
What about laws that might be put in place to protect the tenants, such as the inability to do evictions? Which not even people that have lost jobs, that there's in many states and counties, you can no longer do evictions. How does that affect us apartment owners?
So the short answer is, it's about how long they put those rules in place. And it's about how long does it take to recover. If those eviction rules are non-eviction rules are in place for 6 to 8 weeks, I don't think it affects us, because the moment we have those rules being enforced, we will also have something known as forbearance, which means we would not have to pay our mortgages. We can just push them out into the future. We'll have to pay them at some point 5 years down the line, but we won't be needed to pay them today. So forbearance comes into effect pretty much at the same time as a no eviction policy. But none of that really matters if 8 weeks or 9 weeks from now we can start evicting people again, because they will start paying again. But the problem is, if we don't act aggressively and this thing doesn't go away in 8 to 12 weeks, then our options will become limited. As I said, many of our communities, most of our communities, can go a year without revenue. I don't think that everyone out there, that all of the apartments are capitalized that way. So in that case, you're going to see large-scale defaults in the multifamily arena.
What about utilizing CapEx funds sitting in the escrow with a lender. So this is funds that cannot be used for reserves or contingencies. How would you treat those funds in this environment?
So if it's a bridge loan, the lender has control. They're not going to let you use it as operational funds. If it's a 10-year fixed, then you raise that money yourself, right?
Right.
Yes, I would redirect that money to operations. I would not worry about the CapEx at this point. And that is what we intend to do.
Bridge loan, but in the cases of bridge loan, we are, looking at continuing to renovate on properties that it makes sense.
Yep. If our workers come to work, as long as they keep working, we're going to keep renovating. Now, keep in mind, if that unit can be rented even for $200 less, we're going to rent it out.
Let's see. What is your short-term debt exposure versus your long-term debt exposure? And do you have any concerns about banks calling their notes? When we say we have reserves, what does that mean?
Well, the short answer is yes, the banks can call our loans. Yes, we are worried about that. But it really, the point at which banks call loans are very far into the future. If 12 weeks from now we can't fix this and people are still working at home or not being able to go back and open up restaurants and bars, then we could face that eventuality. So the honest answer to your question, sir, is it's a very good question. It's something we worry about, but it's something that no one's going to do for the next 3 months. I'm going to repeat this webinar 60 days from now. Ask me again.
Let's see. What do you feel the long-term effects of the influx of stimulus by the U.S. government is? Do you feel that this will lead to hyperinflation and create an even bigger bubble in the near future?
Even bigger bubble, yes. Hyperinflation, no. Not in the short run. So the government seems to have gotten very good at keeping inflation down using tools that I don't consider to be ethical, but they are legal. So no, I don't think it leads to hyperinflation in the short run. What we've seen is everyone that has been predicted in hyperinflation for the last 10 years has been wrong for one simple reason. All this stimulus slows growth. As growth is slowing, it's very difficult for inflation to be high. In the last 9 years, we've struggled with inflation being too low. At what point in the last 9 years did inflation hit 3%? I ask you that.
Yeah. So do you have any new syndications deals coming up? What are the deals that are still open to investors, or how will we go about getting information about what is open?
Well, you're in our database, so we'll let you know. We have a public storage project coming up that we're super excited about, and we were so validated. The data that we showed you today is 5 days old. 5 days ago, those REITs were measured, and as you can see, public storage fell the lowest. We've been worried about this because we certainly couldn't foresee something like the coronavirus, but we saw a recession coming. So we started moving to the asset class that is considered the most recession resistant. And that public storage project is going to be open in a week and a half. We strongly recommend you reach out to us because we think it's going to get sold out in a day or two. We do have another project that's coming in. It's a student housing project, and it's a very small, well-capitalized project, very, very small. And
Opportunity zone.
It's an opportunity zone project. We're doing it over 10 years. So we're not really worried about how that market is going to perform or student housing is going to do in the next 6 months, because the project will not even deliver for a year or over a year. So we expect that the things would have settled down by then. Once again, very small project in a market that we believe over the next 5 to 10 years will do really well. And so we're doing that as an opportunity zone project.
I think, Neal, we are at time.
Wow. Yes, we are actually. Well, thank you, everyone. This is obviously the largest webinar we've ever had. We got close to 500 people still listening. Thank you all for joining us. Feel free to bombard us with questions. My email address is on the screen, bottom right.
Did you put up a poll, Neal? I don't think you put up your poll.
Oh, I didn't put up a poll. Hang on, guys. Before you leave, give me 5 seconds and I will put up a poll.
Okay, we're going to answer a few more questions while we put up the poll.
Perfect. The poll's up.
There you go.
Yes. Give us a couple more questions.
Okay. According to the CDC website, I just checked 2009 and 12,469 deaths in the United States due to the H1N1, and now proposed 2,000 to 4,000 deaths.
Yes, but this is not done. So H1N1 is a completed pandemic. It wasn't even a pandemic, right? It was just a crisis. This thing, we believe, is going to be 10x or 20x that number once all is said and done. Did you notice that there were 25,000 new infections worldwide in the last 24 hours? It's not comparable.
Yeah, it's moving very fast. Are there any specific REIT names like mobile home and self-storage apartments that you'd look for your personal account?
I don't know the answer to that question. Send me an email in 30 days. I'll be researching. I think that mobile homes dropped too much in price on the REIT side. They shouldn't have dropped that much.
How much vacancy do you expect to see for apartments, and how will you handle that?
I have no idea because my crystal ball is not working. I mean, it could be 50% in April, right? It could be 20%. It's just, how do you tell? No such event has occurred in the history of civilization, which means that all benchmarks of the past are useless. Wait and watch.
You said be greedy when others are fearful. What is the rational explanation for not doing a deal today then?
Because prices haven't dropped yet.
Do you see a large amount of single family foreclosures in 2021?
Yes, but dispersed in different parts of the US. So once again, I'm using scenario 2, which means that it's a V-shaped recovery. We don't end up in Armageddon. In that scenario, certain markets will be much weaker than others. So we do expect to see foreclosures for single family. Yes, foreclosures will come back. Absolutely.
What is the best way to find deals now with brokers closing down? Do you go direct to the owner, or what strategy would you use?
I'd recommend you don't look for the next 8 weeks. Hunker down, spend time with your family. This is not the time to look at deals. In 8 or 9 weeks, the brokers will reopen, and I don't think the deals even come in 8 weeks. If you want to look at foreclosure stuff, you're going to have to wait for a good 3 months.
Do you think it's a good time to invest in emergency healthcare facilities?
Wow, that's the easiest question I've had all day. Hell yeah. Absolutely. I mean, EMS, EMT services are going to be through the roof for years, because remember, every time something like this happens, it changes our mindset. Look at what happened to security companies after 9/11. They had an entire decade where they had phenomenal growth.
Wow. What type of jobs will see the fastest recovery and the fastest growth?
EMS, anything related to emergency medicine will see the fastest recovery.
And public health, I would think.
Anything related to public health. I mean, this is going to change the paradigm of public health. People still don't understand this. Did you see that video where people were commenting that this is not such a big deal? I guarantee no one is going to say that in 10 days. In 10 days, we'll be at 50,000 infections a day if we don't stop or if we don't slow down.
So given your scenarios, what would you advise for someone looking to become an active syndicator, just getting started, other than just waiting?
My advice, you're very lucky because you're starting with good deals. Just wait for 3 or 4 months. They can't all magically come just because this thing happened 15 days ago.
Yeah,
3 months is not a very small amount of time. This is an excellent time to be a syndicator. But don't let the market soften. It will soften.
Yeah. Can you tell us something, and this kind of feeds right into that, can you tell us something about the online boot camp? I actually answered a question that our live boot camp in June will be back to our e-boot camp in the June timeframe. Can you tell us more about the online boot camp, Neal?
Sure. It's me and Anna teaching. It's eight sessions. Each session, 2.5 hours each day, is filled with data, technology, systems, processes, step-by-step access to our systems, how we do things. Our entire company's technology is shared with you in demos. And by the way, there's no upsell. We're selling nothing other than the bootcamp itself. It's a pure learning and networking experience. And then we team students together in teams of 4 to 6 using structured exercises so that they can go out and hunt together. It's so much easier to take down your first multifamily if you're in a group of 4 to 6.
Yeah. What are your thoughts for the Dallas market for investing?
I think it's a great market. And I think when it softens, there will be lots of great deals to pick up.
Let's see. Well, how's Park Canyon and Dalton the funding coming along for the construction? And how's the construction coming?
We've seen no impact from coronavirus. We've seen 12 days lost because of crazy rain. I'm sure that there's going to be a few weeks lost there because of the pandemic. At this point, we might see less less construction people showing up. We still have some slots available. So if you haven't invested in it, I really think you should look at it.
Do you think properties occupied by government subsidized tenants such as Section 8 will be not affected from the economic downturn, assuming the federal government keeps those programs well funded?
Assuming they keep them well funded, Section 8 right now is an awesome place to be.
Yep. Okay. I think we did it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you everyone for coming. We will be sending you updates on secondary webinars that we're going to be doing on these topics because this is too big to handle in one event. But thanks for coming, all 500 of you. And my apologies to all of those that couldn't get in. We only have 500 licenses for Zoom. So sorry about that. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
And thanks to Angela for fantastic work.
Yep.